Writing Realistic Dialogue, CPL Writing Club, June 2026 edition. Alright, before we really start talking about dialogue, we need to know what it is. So, according to the Merriam-Webster Online Dictionary, the definition for dialogue is the conversational element of literary or dramatic composition, such as a movie, play, or novel. So, basically, the talky bits. There are 5 functions of dialogue within a narrative space. 1. To advance the plot. 2. To help with characterization. 3. Establish context, the tone and mood. And 5. Reveal the theme. Of these 5, I do think the first 3 and first 4 are really the biggest and most important. Yes, 5 will help with the revealing of a theme, but your dialogue needs to fall into one of these 5 categories, preferably one of the top 4, before, how can I put this? If it doesn't fall into one of the 5 categories on here, especially the top 4, it can be cut in editing. And it probably will be cut in editing. Uh, Remember, every bit of your novel should function to everything you write. It should not just be fluff. Talk about how dialogue can go good or how we can improve it. We need bear in mind bad. Several of these may be a thing that you're doing for characterization, especially the like overly formal dialogue bits. If you have a character that is formal or speaking in a formal function, or just their characterization is they always speak formal, then their dialogue, well, not even if they always speak formal, but if they're like a very official person, or you have them not using being extremely formal in just their existence, they're not going to speak with slang or contractions or something. So their dialogue, to match that, should sound formal, and they should use a formal vocabulary. This is part of the characterization part. So all the things that are listed on here may be something you need in order to have your dialogue in one of those 5 categories. In one of these 5 categories. So, overly formal, also alternately underly formal or too slangy, unless your character has that as the characterization of that's how they talk. Exposition. You do need ways to get information to the reader. Dialogue is usually how you're going to get exposition out, but there is such a thing as too much exposition. This is where you run into things like, as you know, or repeating. If you don't know, as you know, that is when you're it's when you're saying things that are already known to the characters but might not be known to the reader. We're coming at this from a literary perspective, so it would be the reader. So it would be something, your father the king is sick. Well, the character that character A is talking to and saying this to is talking to character B. Character B already knows the king is their father, so there would be no reason for the dialogue from character A to say, as you know, your father the king. It would just be, your father is sick. There is no reason to have all of these additional things added onto it. So it is a way to get, you're going to find it less in spoken dialogue, like not spoken, even just real world dialogue. We really just don't do it. It's part of our normal reading, normal speaking, but it does happen in written dialogue because you are needing to get information, because you are needing to advance the plot or establish context. But there is a point at which you get too much exposition, and that is where you end up tipping over into things like info dumping, or information dumping, info dumping for short. That can be where you have an exposition, I cannot speak, uh, that is wordy or extremely long, or you might end up accidentally uh, having a character that their whole purpose is just to give exposition, and that is not really good for your plot. Um, so that is one of the things that can happen just with the exposition part. This next one, phonetic spelling. There is nothing wrong with phonetic spelling. You just have to be aware if you are using phonetic spelling, then you should be aware that several of your readers might not understand it. This is where you get things like putting accents into dialogue. For example, Hagrid in the Harry Potter books, the way he is written, his dialogue is written with a phonetic spelling. You're a wizard, Harry. It's not you're a wizard, Harry. It's you're a wizard, Harry, because he drops the H. Um, Again, if this is something you want to have for your dialogue or for your characterization, you can have it, just be consistent with it. Just also be aware that you may have several of your readers who just completely can't understand that character. It happens. Alright. A homogenized voice. What this means is all of your characters sound and speak exactly the same. This is where you get into the helping with characterization part of your writing. Now, is every single character going to sound different? Probably not. They're all going to have like your base vocabulary, but the way in which you write it out will give them characterization. Maybe all of your guards talk the same. That is perfectly fine, but how all your guards talk should be different than how your main character talks, unless your main character is also a guard. And even then, your main character should have their own sort of speaking voice, a way of speaking, certain vocabulary they use, certain phrases they use, and how a female character is going to talk and use their word choice is going to be different than how a male character talks and uses their choices. This is one of the more subtle ones on here. It can be very difficult to do. For some people, other people have no problem doing it. You just don't want all your characters to sound exactly the same. Their personalities should come out in how they talk. Next is the lack of action. This does not mean action tags. We'll cover that in just a little bit. The lack of action when speaking. This is the dialogue moving the plot forward. Is this dialogue important to the characters or the setting or the story? If it isn't, get rid of it. I already covered the info dumping with the exposition, but this is something that does come up a lot. Admittedly, certain genres are going to have more exposition and info dumping than others. Anything science fiction, fantasy is going to have more exposition than, say, a modern romance or contemporary, just because of the level of world building and background that are in the former versus the latter. And then you end up with my other favorite, the pages of just text. Now, there's more I'm going to cover that I didn't list out as bullet points on here, but what I mean by pages of just text, this is where you have a dialogue scene that just runs for several pages with nothing happening. It's just the characters talking. Even when you're watching like a TV show and they're just talking, like you have a whole scene where they're having a conversation, there's still action going on in the scene. The conversation is moving. When it comes to the written, it's a bit more difficult to do that. If you're going to have a long scene that is just basically a very long section of dialogue, a very long conversation, you do need to intersperse it with actual actions. Uh, if your characters are at a banquet and they're eating and having a conversation, you should have things going on at the same time that are your actions and break up the monotony of the dialogue. To help us figure out our characters, there is such a thing as overuse. All right, some more other ways that it can fail. Overusing quips. This is some of the things that happens when, again, this is for the more mood setting or tone setting. If you're trying to establish a very serious scene, don't have them making cracking jokes. But again, any of this advice can be ignored when when you're trying to get a certain theme or thing across. If your character is just a jokester, them suddenly stopping being a jokester feels more alarming than them still acting like a complete clown during a very serious point. That's that's one of the things. Another one is the lack of subtext. This is when characters speak exactly what they are thinking and feeling without filters, hesitation, or nuance. Why does this fail? Because people rarely say exactly what they mean. Most dialogue is talking around something. You're not wanting to come out and directly admit it to your readers, or your characters do not want to directly admit something to another character. So they're going to talk around it. If they don't and they just blast straight through it, it sounds very stiff and very unnatural. So that's just some of the ways dialogue can go bad. Now, how can we make. Now, what is some rules, I'm putting air quotes around that, for good dialogue in fiction versus real life? For one, you're not trying to be one to one with real life. Because real life talking, when it's written out, is boring. Don't believe me? Just go sit somewhere where a lot of people are talking and just sit and listen and imagine reading that in a book. You'll get bored very fast. Dialogue in fiction usually, emphasis on usually, does not use filler words. Ah. Those words that you do when you're in between thoughts or you're trying to drag out time, those typically do not exist. You don't see them very often in dialogue in like fiction. Now, they can be used, again, if you're using it as a characterization thing, Yes, like would be on here. And we all know the California Valley girl, like, awesome dude, like, that is so, like, totally awesome. Notice how that filler word of like is used, but that is a characterization point for a character that uses them because there is the expectation of, like, the Valley girl uses words like that. Subtext, 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 subtext. Again, you are not coming out directly and saying something. This is stuff like your characters are not going to say exactly what they're thinking or exactly what they're feeling. This is where you can build up tension. This is where you can have friction, hidden emotions, secrets. This is where you get the subtext. And oftentimes it's not spoken directly. Say character A and character C have a secret that could affect character B. Character A doesn't want character B to know about it, so the character B and character C are having a conversation. Character C is having to talk around this secret. And that's the subtext because the readers know that character A and C have this secret. Character B does not. So there is tension in character C talking around this topic. Body language. In real life, a lot of our dialogue is secondary to body language. Yes, you can say one thing, but if you're doing something with your body, it can mean another. That typically is not the same with written dialogue. It's different for if you're writing for television or movies because there are actions that can be tagged on to your writing, which is screen, basically stage actions, at the same time you're doing dialogue. But for things like novels, you're relying less on body language, so you need to rely more on your wording. Yes, there are things like action tags, which is where we came up with the balance with action. You, like I said, you don't want just pages and pages and pages of dialogue. No one wants to read a 5 page long conversation about how someone's day was, or a 5 page long dinner conversation. You want to get in, get to the nitty gritty, and get out. You want to get in, have some action happen as well, and get out. And then the hardest part is getting your rhythm, or what I call rhythm. Some would also probably call it pace. If you are going to have a very tense scene, your dialogue is going to be shorter. It's going to be more clipped. You might not even have full sentences. That's another thing that is really good about dialogue is you don't have to have full sentences. We do not speak completely in full sentences. So that is something you can also bring to your dialogue. But if you're going for something much more relaxed, if this scene isn't exactly about bringing up tension, but it's more about showing like a character's emotions, maybe their happiness or how relaxed they are, you can show that in your dialogue by have them speak in a more flowing, longer manner than say a character who is trying a group of like I don't know. Criminal Minds is a good example of this. Their dialogue gets more clipped and short with each other. The closer they get to the climax of the episode, you can actually watch that happen. Their sentence structure of their dialogue gets actually shorter, and that is to build up tension. It's something that you don't really notice until you start writing these kind of scenes. It's the same thing with your actions. Shorter sentences, faster sentences often are used to ratchet up tension and give a sense of more speed to a scene. So your dialogue should mirror or should or the sense of the emotional state All that said, if you are having trouble making your dialogue sound good when you're reading it, or you think, oh, that doesn't sound like, is that really what someone would say? Go grab a friend and start reading the dialogue out loud. I swear it helps so much to talk it out loud and hear how it would be spoken. Because, yes, real life talking and talking in real life versus dialogue talking in novels is going to sound different, but there are still the same rules of if it doesn't sound right, why are you doing it? This can help you figure out context. Is it making sense? Help with, would a character actually sound like this? You can make yourself sound like a Valley Girl and like say like this a lot, like it's so totally awesome and like that, versus if you're just talking like this and you're doing this and you're like, a Valley Girl character would not sound like this. They would sound like a lot more bubbly and they wouldn't be using as many big words unless it was like really, really important. Really good movie to show this is Legally Blonde. I am not joking. I love that movie. But look at the if you ever watch the movie, listen to the difference in how Elle Woods talks versus how the other characters talk at the beginning, and then as you go through you see the evolution of her speaking. It doesn't really change because her character is changing, but Elle Woods is Elle Woods. She's not going to stop being the California Valley girl, the blonde, the legally blonde. That is her character, and it stays with her throughout the whole movie. That is why in the spoiler here, if you don't want to hear a spoiler for Legally Blonde, which I do know is over a 10-year-old movie, so if you don't want a spoiler to the dramatic climax, click away now. I will give you 5 seconds. 5, 4, 3, excuse me, 1. When Elle Woods is in the courtroom interrogating, cross examining the daughter who is the witness to this murder trial, you can hear in the way she speaks going from Valley Girl to straight into professional as she realizes that no, it would have been impossible for the daughter to have been taking a shower and still have the curls that she has because of scientific thing with permanent solution. There's a reason why you don't wash your hair after a permanent for at least a day. Couple days is better, is because it washes out the curls because of a chemical reaction that causes the perm. Watch the movie, Elle explains it fantastically. But you hear, as she is talking, she goes from simple, 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 bam, she starts throwing out chemistry. And it's at that point you're like, really? The change in mode as she speaks is shown through the dialogue choices of the words picked. So again, it goes from like short sentences, short sentence, short sentence. This one long run-on sentence as she is explaining the big point of this whole thing. Short sentences, short sentences. That is going to bring attention to the one big long sentence in the middle of it that she spoke. So that's some other things you can play with the rhythm of your talking or the pace that you're using for your dialogue. Got one more slide on here and then we will be done. Dialogue tags. This is the he said, she said. If you go online and you look up whether or not you should use dialogue tags, you will get a million different pieces of advice. That's because no one can agree on this, because there is no one thing to agree on. The one thing people do agree on is action verbs mean a full stop. What do I mean by this? She looks ridiculous, he laughed. Should be, she looks ridiculous, he laughed. You cannot speak and laugh at the same time. If your character is going to be doing an action that is attached to dialogue, there needs to be a full stop. Now, there's some that don't, such as whispered, screamed, because those are an act of speaking. That is something you will need to go into possibly a dictionary. But, like, let's say you have a character that's angry and slapping another character. A goes, I can't believe you did this. They slap. They said as they slapped. You can use that and say, they said as they slapped. I can't believe you did this. They said as they slapped character B. You can also do, I can't believe you did this. Period. Character A slapped character B. They slapped character A. Character B. It does give. It does make the scene a little bit. Does make the reading a little bit different. So this is something you need to play with. One bit of advice that I have seen pop up a lot is to avoid using adverbs. So that's going to be your lees. You also don't need to, like, she suddenly said. Well, if she's popping into the middle of a conversation, yeah, that's going to be sudden. You don't need to say that. So, things like that. Unfortunately, the only way to really get. I hate to say this phrase, but get better at it is going to be to read. And read a lot. Because again, dialogue tags are one of those things that no one really seems to agree with. There are different camps have with different beliefs that say, oh, you should never use dialogue tags beyond like said and asked. And other ones that say, no, you can use other tags like screamed, yelled, whispered if they're needed. And then other ones that say, it doesn't really matter if you do or not. Go ahead, use everything you want. One thing most people can agree with, though, is you don't need a tag, whether it's a dialogue tag or an action tag, for every bit of dialogue. If you are writing your dialogue well, someone should be able to figure out by reading a page of dialogue which character is saying what. It's easier when I will admit this is easier when you only have two characters who are engaged in a conversation, because usually it's character A talks, then B, then A, then B, then A, then B. When you start adding more in, that's when you start getting into the you need to identify the speaker in confusing situations or conversations. Do not be afraid to use the character's name, especially if they are characters who you would assign the same gender pronoun. So if you have three male characters having a conversation, and you need to tag who the speaker is, you do not. It may be more appropriate to use he, or it may be more appropriate to use their name. This is one of those things where you're going to have to talk it out loud. Because if you can keep track, or if another person who you are helping or who's helping you with dialogue, if they can keep track of who is talking is who. That is good, but you can always use an identifying marker of like character A said, character B said, character C said. You can also put action tags and dialogue tags at the beginning of your dialogue. They do not have to come at the end. Sometimes you want an action to take place and then there's be something spoken. That is also something that is correct and can be done. It does affect the rhythm of in order to get a certain pace or tone. Another thing, didn't add it onto any of these slides. Whenever there is a new speaker, a new paragraph needs to be made. I'm sorry to emphasize this, but I have seen far too much writing online in web serials of people who do not start a new paragraph for a new speaker. That is a visual way of cueing your audience that a new person is talking. And it needs to be done every time there is a new speaker. So that is our lovely little writing realistic dialogue talk for today. Sorry, I'm sneezing so much today and I constantly feel like I'm going to sneeze when I recorded this. If you have any questions, please feel free to send them to me. Either email me at cassie@clintonpl.lib.in.us or you can send me a message through our Google Classroom. I will get back to you. You can also add on to any of the comments here on YouTube, Facebook, or Twitch, and I will get back to you. So, thank you very much, and y'all have a nice evening.